And we're returning to Genesis, where we left off some weeks ago. And we're on page 23 in the little Bibles. But let me give you a little synopsis of what happened here so that you can get an idea of what this is about, okay? You have Isaac, who actually represents the mind, okay? Isaac represents the mind, the overall personality, the ego, you know. You have Esau, was one of the sons who represents that, which is the left side. You have Jacob, who is another son who represents that, which is the right side, the creative side. Now, there's a lot of thought, you know, in New Age circles and so forth, that this is bad. And I know there's a lot of thought in Christian circles that the physical is bad. And that's wrong. And we should eliminate that totally. Being spiritual without a body is ridiculous. I like cookies and ice cream and all that stuff, and I don't think you'd eat that stuff and floating around in a cloud somewhere. So it's very, very important to consider that these are equally important, but they have different roles to play in your life. And then we have Rebecca, who represents the spirit. Okay, she's the mother and she's the spirit. And what has happened is that the mind, Isaac, was going to bestow a blessing on that which is the physical or the left side. Okay, so this is the physical, and this would be the spiritual or the divine part. Okay, and Isaac was going to give the blessing to Esau, which would be the left side. So what happened was the spirit got together with the child of promise, Jacob, and they put hairy skin on his arm so that he would feel like Esau, because Isaac couldn't see too well. And Jacob went in and deceived Isaac and stole the blessing. Okay? And that sounds like a terrible thing, you know, in religious circles, but understand what this is. In order for you to get the blessing of that which is the divine mind, you've got to trick the mind so that it doesn't go to the physical, but goes to the spiritual. And how do you trick the mind? Om, mantras, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Om Mani Padme Om, all of these types of things, listening to the New Age music and all of that stuff, seduces or tricks the mind so that way it turns off or it cuts off. This is what's called taking no thought. It cuts off the direction of the mind to the left side and then starts to pick it up on the right side. So it's very important then that the story talks about Jacob tricking Isaac, because what it's saying is that you must actually trick your mind. So when we come in here on Tuesdays or Thursdays for meditation, the music, the sounds, the bells, the gongs, whatever it is to trick the mind to set it free from the left side. And this has happened. Okay, so in the story this takes place, Jacob has stolen this blessing. But now what happens? Between the two of them, there's a real enmity. There's a hate. There's a war that's going on between the left side and the right side, between Esau and Jacob. For those of you who sat and we studied a few months or last year about the Bhagavad Gita of Hare Krishna, is the story of the conflict between the left side and the right side. So there's an enmity between Esau and Jacob. There's a separation between the carnal and the divine. It doesn't mean that one is more important than the other, but there is a separation. They have a different job to do within you, and they both struggle for superiority within your own personality. See? But here we know, and we can see about that enmity. Take a look at page 924, and look at the book of Romans, in the book of Romans chapter 8. And in Romans chapter 8, verse 7, the Apostle Paul says, the carnal mind is enmity against God. It is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can it be. So here is this story then of the struggle between the left side and the right side. The struggle between that which is your physical and that which is your spiritual. The struggle between that which is the lower flesh and that which is the higher divine principle within you. This is a continuation of the Cain and Abel story, okay? What was such a big deal about Abel? It said he brought sheep. And God loved that, but it said Cain brought the things, the fruit of the ground and vegetables and all that, and God didn't like that, and I could never deal with that. What's the matter with this guy? This guy, God is nuts. He says, this guy likes sheep, and he's going to like him. The other guy worked as hard as he could. All he had was cabbage and broccoli and string beans, and why get mad at him? But see, the understanding of this, Bringing sheep means you bring those which are your thoughts. Sheep always mean thoughts in mysticism. Bringing sheep means bringing thoughts, while bringing the vegetables are those things which are dug out of the ground, those things you dig up, your own ideas. And your own ideas aren't going to make it. But once there is a touch between you and the Spirit, once the Spirit picks up that which is the right side, then there's a struggle that goes on, because your carnal mind will try to get you back. Your carnal mind will do whatever it can to pull you back. See? Go back to page 23. And in Genesis 27, we see what develops now between the left side and the right side, between Jacob and Esau. In Genesis chapter 27 and verse 41, we see what Esau says. Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing. And Esau said in his heart, the days for mourning my father are at hand, then will I slay my brother Jacob. In other words, that which is the left side will do anything to kill out the right side. And it doesn't mean that the left side is evil. It's got a job to do. It's got something for you. I mean, you want to play ball. You want to watch the football game. I mean, you want to go dancing. You want to go to Atlantic City. You want to see a show. Whatever it is, all of these things are very important. And it has to be fulfilled. See? But what's being said here, there has to be a balance. And if it's all this and none of this, your life is screwed up. If it's all this and none of this, your life is screwed up. It's like where people come on television, and you'll see people in religious television, and they're totally unrealistic, because they got you praying all the time, and they got you singing religious songs all the time, and they got you going Wednesday night to some church supper, and you open plates, and there's ziti under there, and all of this stuff, and you don't want to do that. It's not realistic that you do that. It's not reasonable that you do that. And all of the things that you like to do are declared evil. Say. And so there's a problem, and there's a struggle that goes on, and it gets to the point where it says in the book here that the left side, Esau, is setting about to kill out the right side. So there's a conflict within you. You know what this is when the left side wants to kill the right side? There's a conflict within your own mind. There's a struggle within your own mind. There's this constant words inside of you, and you don't know which way to turn. And one way, well, maybe I should do this. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. And all of this stuff goes on. You run a movie. You got a movie theater inside of your head. And there's a double feature playing. And one feature is chaos, and the other feature is confusion. And when one starts, the other starts. And inside of your head, this constantly goes on. It just seems like it never stops. And even when you go to sleep, then the bedlam really starts. Because all of the wild, uncontrolled stuff goes on. So what happens, say? I will slay my brother. Here's the conflict between you. Inside of your mind, this conflict rages. And here comes Rebecca, the Spirit. Your spirit speaks. Inside of you, the inner spirit says something. And look what in verse 43. Now, Genesis chapter 27, verse 43. And here's what Rebecca says. My son, talking to Jacob, obey my voice, and arise and flee to Laban, my brother, to Haran. The inner conflicts and agitation brings us to the point of spiritual awareness, and the Spirit says, you must separate. You must separate. You're going to try to figure your problems out? You're never going to figure them out. You've been trying to figure your problems out all of your life, and they're still there. And you know what? Once you've got your problems figured out, you know what will happen tomorrow? There'll be a new one. It's like climbing to the top of the mountain. I've given my whole life. And when you get to the top of the mountain and you look, there's another mountain. It never ends. And so it is an eternal conflict. But what Rebecca, the Spirit, says, you've got to stop. You've got to separate. And where should you go? You should go to my brother. In other words, that which is the brother of the Spirit is the divine mind. Where? What is his name? His name is Laban, L-A-B-A-N. And the word Laban means white. White. And where is he? He's at Haran, H-A-R-A-N. And the word Haran means mountain. Separate and go to the white mountain. Separate and go to the higher place of virgin consciousness. Separate and go to that high place within you where there is no stain of thought, where there is no fighting, where there is no screaming inside of your head. You've got to take that time. And all that's being said 4,000 years ago in that story is what you teach all the time. Meditate. go to the White Mountain. These stories are great, but it all boils down to the same thing. You've got to separate from the conflict within yourself. But you know what's the hardest thing to do? Because we love this. A lot of times I love the conflict. Because I can sulk in the conflict. Say, when are you going to be nice? When I feel like it. Because once Esau takes over, he becomes you. And you will become, like me, very, very snotty. And I really don't care. And that's so, and you know what? You can look at me, but you know it's true. And you know when Esau has taken over. But there is a point here sometimes when Esau and Jacob are screaming inside of you and you don't know which side. And that's when your mother, the Spirit, says, go up to the White Mountain. Separate. Quickly. There's an interesting statement that the Spirit, Rebecca, makes in verse 45. And it talks of the violence and conflict between the left and the right side that can result in the destruction of your personality. Because if you don't do something about it, you can either wind up in an institution, you can wind up taking this or taking that or taking the other things, you can wind up in a divorce, you can wind up in a violent confrontation. Oh, you can have a wonderful thing on the right side. Hey, OJ, plenty of good things. Great football player, clean-cut guy, jumping through airports. But there was something inside of him that was Esau that was going to... And there was a rage that went in within him. And he never obviously made it to the White Mountain. And it's a rage. And when that rage gets to a point where it's unchecked, it can destroy the entire personality. And Rebecca in Genesis 27:45 says, until your brother's anger stops, and he forgets that which you've done, then I'll send and fetch you. But why should I be deprived of both of you in one day? In other words, if you don't stop this, the whole damn family is going to be destroyed. If you don't stop, if you don't do something. And remember something, you're not capable of stopping this. You have to shut it off. You have to run to the White Mountain. And that means you have to go into meditation. There is no other way, because if you don't, your mind, the Esau, will never start screaming at you, and Jacob will try to fight, and the two will have a conflict within you, and it will destroy you and everything that you love. And that's the lesson of the ruination of this world. Joan and I got mail from this animal place yesterday with pictures of these torture of these animals out in California. Oh, sure, there may be after some animal experimentation under set conditions for a particular thing. We can live with it. But the hideous stuff that goes on, the bizarre torture that they subject these animals to. And what do you think happens? Oh, they think, oh, well, we're discovering this. But for every disease they discovered a cure for, there's been another one that's jumped up to just rip the guts out of people. And for everything that they've come against nature with, and the violence and the torture against these innocent things, Mother Nature has come crashing down on this earth in one way or another in the form of whether it be a tornado or a flood or a hurricane. It never stopped. And Shakyamuni Buddha 4,000 years ago said, the reason that you put nature into such a turmoil and the reason that there are so many storms which kill so many people is because of the negative vibrations which are being put into the atmosphere by the very same people. Do you think you can torture the innocent ones of nature for monetary gain, and nature will not respond? Certainly she'll respond. Just like a mother sometimes spanks a child, nature will respond. And I loved it when you said you went out and you sat in the midst of the leaves and the trees, and you sat in her arms and respected her, and she loved you. So the child of promise here, which is within each one of us, is clearly defined to stay away. And you know what this is called in Scripture, in metaphysics? In this particular story, it's Esau, but you know what it's also called? Well, not in the scripture. It's called the strange woman. Because it means the emotions. And it means that you are having an affair with a strange woman. It means that you're intercoursing with your own emotions. And the children born of your intercourse with your emotions are the wild, ravaging, screaming things that run around inside. You know how kids sometimes get wild inside of your house and start throwing things and screaming and breaking things and all of this stuff? The exact same children are born inside of here, and they do the same thing. To stay away from the strange woman. So there's a covenant that's being made now. Look at, I'll show you something for some of you who haven't been here before. I'll show you something interesting, but I'll show you the covenant about the strange woman. Go to page 18, Genesis chapter 24. Is it getting too hot in here? Okay. Genesis chapter 24. See verse 2? Page 30, what did I say? 18. This is the origin of the word testify. You know the origin of the word testify? It says in verse 2, Abraham said to his person, "Put, I pray you, your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear." If somebody puts their hand under your thigh, you'll probably swear too, but that's not what's being said here. What they used to do in those days, as today, you know, you put your hand over your heart and say, "I swear." Well, in those days, they put their hand on the male sexual organ and did the same thing. And if you look in the dictionary, you'll find that the word testes is two things. It's the root of the word testicles, which is the male sexual organ, and it also means to give witness, and that's where it comes from. New Testament, that's why women can't testify. In church, I guess. I don't know. You're not allowed to speak, lady. Now, don't get embarrassed. No, I know, I'm teasing. But Abraham makes his servant swear that you shall not take a wife unto my son Isaac of the daughters of the Canaanites. In other words, what's being said here, the child of promise cannot intercourse with that which is the emotions. Okay? Spirit seeks to be sure that the divine principle does not fall to intercourse with the lower emotions. And again, you see this in the Jacob story. Look at Genesis chapter 27, back where we were on page 23, and verse 46. Genesis chapter 27 and verse 46. And here, you see what is said is, Rebekah said, "I'm weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth." If Jacob takes a wife of the daughters of Heth, such as which are the daughters of, what good shall my life be to me? Thus the spiritual ego will fall into a relationship with the emotions, which is fear, and the spirit aspect of our being says, what good shall my life be for? What good is your life for you because you're controlled by your emotions? What good is my life to me when I'm controlled by my emotions? When I am controlled by my emotions, I am berserk. I'll tell you that if you ever come around. I mean, really, I can get into all kinds of moods and sullenness and sulking. And you know what? I can't do anything about it. It's like a storm. Do you ever see, when you sit around here and you hear a storm rumbling off to the west and you hear the thunder and you see the dark clouds forming up, you know a storm's coming. You know when you're getting ready to get into a mood and you know you're going to get into a mood and you feel it coming on and there's nothing you can do about it. And then after a while, you get to enjoy the mood. And the mood climbs, in the storm, the clouds get darker and darker and darker. And then the thunder starts roaring inside of you. And there is nobody on the face of this earth that can get you out of that because that's exactly what you want to be. Now you enjoy it. But you know what? The storm blows away. And then you decide to come out of your room. How you doing? What's new?
It's exactly how you do.
It's exactly. Here I am again. How are you? Everything okay? Yeah, sweet, here I am. All right, sweet. Yeah, look at me. Aren't I cute? It all blows away. And it's just like a storm that dumps its rain and dumps its winds and dumps its torrents on the earth and then blows out to sea. And you You have to but see, you understand it. And the one thing that I've been able to do because of meditation is understand it. And another thing I'm able to do, what I do a lot of times now, is that I will take, when I realize that I am in the center of a storm, I'll sit by the window sometimes and stare out at the dark street, and maybe I'll slip a little disc of Tchaikovsky or something in, and then I can fly away until the storm abates. In other words, I flee to the White Mountain. You really can. Doesn't mean I'm any nicer or any sweeter to be around, but I get to the White Mountain and it brings me down and it brings me safely out a lot quicker. Let me show you what's being said here so that you understand. Go to the book of Proverbs. Go to page 542. And on page 542, I want you to look at Proverbs chapter 2, okay? Proverbs chapter 2. And look at verse 16. To deliver you from the strange woman, even from the stranger which flatters with her words, which forsakes the guide of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God. For her house inclines unto death, and her paths unto the dead. And I've seen some of you come in here with just about ready to rip your hair out. You hear them snickering in here? Sure, well, it's okay, and that's what I want you to know, that I do the same thing. We all do. Nobody's privy, and nobody says is immune to this. But when you begin to understand that there is a part in you that will do it, and there is a way, even in spite of your ego and in spite of the stubbornness that we don't, there is a way, when you're up to it, that you can put some music on or put some earphones on or just sit and stare and get over to the White Mountain and get up and above it. So just as Isaac learned about the strange woman, he brings Jacob, our other child of promise. And in page 23 again on Genesis chapter 28, the mind speaks and warns Jacob. And this is it, Genesis chapter 28 and verse 1. And Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and said to him, you shall not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. This is emotional spirituality. So where must we go? We must take our conscious impulse someplace special. We've got to be aware that we cannot spend our time intercoursing with our emotions. We cannot spend our time feeling sorry for ourselves. We cannot spend our time plotting all of these grand scale things that we're going to do to get out of the mess we're in. We've got to realize that when we're doing that, we're intercoursing with the strange woman. We're intercoursing with the left side. We've got to go someplace, and it says in Genesis chapter 2, Genesis chapter 28, verse 2, arise and go to Padam Aram. And Padam Aram means the high place. Get up and go to the high place. And you know what's so beautiful about this? You don't have to tell me you did what I suggested, because that's the worst. I never like to do that. I never like to do what anybody tells me to do. I love to do just the opposite, and I will. People tell me to do this, I'll do just the opposite. When I used to be in the regular churches, everybody sat down, I get up. Because I'm a terrible revolutionary like that. I believe in individuality, I believe in individual freedom, and I believe you have to chart your own course. But you can do this, and I'll never know it. But you should. You should arise and go to the high place. And it says, look what it says, the house of Bethuel. And you know what it means, the house of Bethuel? You know what that means? The house of the virgin. The house of the virgin. The house of the virgin. Your mother's father, Laban, the place of divine purity, and take a wife from the daughters. In other words, take a wife from the desires of Laban. In other words, take a wife from the desires of the pure mind. Start intercoursing with that which is this feminine principle of spirit in your meditation. If you'll only understand how this works, if you'll only understand this is not a religious thing, if you'll only understand that psychiatrists realize, the psychologists realize, the scientists realize, the universe realizes, it's cosmic mind, it's within, between your own ears. It's so personal, it doesn't cost you a dime. And all you have to do is discipline yourself to spend some time within and direct your energy upward, and you'll intercourse with that which is the divine one from the high mountain of that which is peace and love and understanding, which will start to direct you. So we rise to the place of virgin consciousness. We enter into the place of absolute purity. We enter into the place of absolute perfection, which is the place of whiteness, which is the place of Laban. In Revelation 2:17 it says, I will give him a white stone. What are you going to have to overcome? You have to overcome yourself. I have to overcome myself. I have one enemy in the world, my thoughts. It's the only enemy you've got, it's your thoughts. You say, somebody, I'm not picking on you two, but here's this, stand up here for a minute. Why don't you turn around so they can say, see these two? See, now this one here is always stirring up this trouble. And she says here, why are you always stirring this up? Yeah, I'm always, see, you're always happy, you're always peaceful. Then she comes along and starts stirring all this stuff up. Right? Say yes.
Yes.
It's not true, I'm only kidding. Sit down. You were great. It's your debut. You were just great. Congratulations. But you know what Buddha said? Would you just stand up a minute? Buddha said she didn't stir anything up. It's not the person who stirs. Sit down. It's the one whose cup had sediment in the bottom of it. See? What he's saying is, if you clean your own cup, the other person can stir all they want, and your cup will never get dirty. It's not the person that's stirring, it's the sediment in the bottom of your cup. It's all the crap that's collected there from your youth, from your families, from your teachers, from the government, all the things that have made you feel so rotten lays at the bottom, and all somebody's got to do is come and say one word and it'll blow you off like that. Do you ever get to the point where you're right on the edge and you've got a chip this big, and all you need is one person just to look at you and you explode? See? Your cup can't take any more sediment. But what Buddha is saying is the meditation cleans the bottom of the cup, and then when they come and they can stir and they can do all they want to try to get that water dirty, but it's not going to get dirty because you have cleaned out the cup yourself. He that overcomes, it says, shall be clothed in white raiments. In other words, you overcome yourself and you are living in that which is separated from all of those things. So Esau, the physical side, goes forth and takes wives. And guess who Esau takes where he goes to get his wives? Esau goes where to get his wives. Now this is the left side. This is the physical side. Look at page 23 again. Look at Genesis chapter 28. Do you remember our friend? Look at chapter 28. And verse 9. Esau went unto Ishmael. You remember Ishmael? Ishmael is actually the father of Muslim religion. Hey, are you Muslim? Welcome. Esau is the father, so you know about Ishmael. Ishmael is the father of the Muslim religion. And Esau goes and he takes of the children of Ishmael. The physical. And it's, as I said to you, this is just as important as the spiritual. Look, you know what? I'll tell you right now. You want to know how important it is? Every single person in this room will desperately preserve your physical life before you'll even give two thoughts to your spiritual life. That's how important it is. And so this is the point then. The beautiful point where we're just going to leave this story and just start something real quick because we got to get where Esau goes and takes what is the children of Ishmael, and Jacob moves up into the higher place to separate, and the two are separated. We'll catch up with them in a little while, but here just for a moment when we close this thing out, I want to go with you and just show you something very occult, very beautiful, and we'll conclude with it as we get to this point. Genesis chapter 28, okay? And in Genesis chapter 28, on page 23, in verse 11, okay? Jacob goes to a certain place. Now remember, here you are. You've come through the conflict of your own mind. You've come through the struggles of your own mind. You've separated. You've gone into meditation so that you've separated from all of that hostility and all of that screaming within you. This is what Jacob is. And in Genesis chapter 28, verse 11, it says, he went upon a certain place and stayed there all night because the sun was set. He took of the stones of that place and put them for his pillows and lay down in that place to sleep. And then it says, and he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. That's the universal law of what they call evolution and involution. Evolution and involution. Jesus comes down, Jesus goes up. The sun comes down, the sun goes up. The chrism comes down from the claustrum. The chrism goes up. The energy comes down to the solar plexus. The energy goes back up through the kundalini. The angels come down. The angels go up. Did you know that the story of Jesus coming down and ascending back up to the Father's house is the story of the chrism, which is the life oil which comes down from the claustrum of the brain and comes down into your body and accumulates in the solar plexus and then gives life to the flesh. And then through the power of meditation and the kundalini, the chrism, through the crucifixion of meditation, rises back up the spinal canal and touches the pineal gland, which is the father of the lamb of Aries, which takes away the cold and the guilt and throws open the right hemisphere, and summer comes to your life. Did you know that was the whole story about? The sun comes down, the sun goes up, Jesus comes down, Jesus goes up. The chrism comes down, the chrism goes up. And when the chrism ascends back up the spinal canal, it lights the lamp of the pineal gland and throws light to the right side. That's what this is. It says in Genesis chapter 28, verse 13, where we're at, it says, and behold, the Lord stood above it. God stands at the top of the ladder, which is the higher mind. And in verse 18, it says, Jacob took the stone he used for a pillow. Look what it says in verse 18. And he took the stone that he had put for his pillow, and he set it up for a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. The stone is the pineal stone. And the oil is the chrism, which raises itself from the solar plexus up the spinal canal. And when it touches the pineal, the oil is poured on that stone, which Jacob put at the top. And there's the holy place. Who did he see standing at the top of the ladder? God. Go to page 29, real quick. I'll tell you the stone. In Genesis chapter 32. Are you there? Look at verse 30. You want to look at it real close because maybe you've never seen this before. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. Do you see it? Do you know up until about the 1940s, doctors didn't even know what the pineal was. But Jacob called it Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is reserved. It's the sacred pine cone. Do you know what it is? Do you know it's shaped like a little pine cone? Did you know that? And it's a little pine cone that's in the center of your brain. And when the energy, the fire from the solar plexus raises itself upward through meditation, it hits that pine cone, the pineal, and the pineal opens up and explodes. And the seeds of life pour out throughout your brain. Do you know where you can see it? Right out here in the pine barrens. The pine cones lay on the ground, and they await the fires. And the fires come through the forest. And when the heat hits the pine cone, it explodes. And the seeds pour out, and new forest is born. It is exactly a demonstration of God as to what goes on inside of you, the sacred pine cone, the sacred pineal. And here that pine cone, here Jacob says, I'll call the place Peniel because I have seen God face to face. The stone is placed for a pillar, and the oil is poured on it, which is the chrism. And that's anointing the head with oil. Do you know that people to this day, in places, in churches, will actually take real oil or baby oil or olive oil and put it on your head? For what? What is it going to do? It makes your head slippery. But what is it going to do? It's not talking about that. The anointing of the oil is the chrism inside of you that raises itself up to the pineal through your meditation. That's the anointing of the head with oil. The next statement is very interesting. We're closing out. Genesis chapter 28 and verse 19. And it says, and he called the name of the place Bethel. But it was called Luz at first. You know what Luz means? It means nut tree. It means nut tree. And here I have a combination of two things, ancient mythology and Kabbalah. You know who Nut was, besides us? The Egyptian sky goddess. The goddess of the mind. The goddess of the mind. That's why you call people a nut. Nut was the Egyptian sky goddess, the goddess of the mind. And the tree is the tree is the tree of life. So the nut tree is the tree of life, which is activated by that which is the goddess, the feminine spiritual principle of the higher mind. Becomes what? The feminine spiritual principle of the higher mind, Luz, becomes Bethel, the house of God. Mark 14:58, it says, I will destroy this temple made with hands, and with 3 days I will build another one made without hands. The only temples on the face of the earth made without hands are the ones on the side of your head. The Spirit of God dwells in you, it says in 1 Corinthians 3:16. Just go there real quick, page 933. Page 933. 1 Corinthians 3. And look at verse 16. You should see it. Okay? You should see it. I think I was in, am I? No, yeah, I'm in the right place. 1 Corinthians chapter 3 in verse 16 says, don't you know that you are the temple and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? And do you know what? And that's the only thing I have ever preached in this place, and I am called an occult maniac, a Satanist. And what's it say in the book? Don't you know? You're the temple, and the Spirit of God dwells in you. So, the stone is the peniel. And I'll tell you something, your religious preachers, your religious teachers, your religions do not acknowledge the pineal. Have you ever been in a church where they told you about the pineal gland? No. They don't acknowledge it. And in fact, if you teach about it, you're called about it. It is the stone. It is the stone that Jacob placed. It is the stone that dwells inside of you, which is the pineal gland of the brain. The pineal stone. And I'll give you one last scripture, okay? And that's on page 525. Just look at that one with me and then we're done. Page 525. Psalm 118. And this is what it talks about. And this is, you can see it in today. The fact that they know nothing of this in this new age. They know nothing of the new age. They know nothing of these crop circles. They know nothing of what is coming down by the light beings of the universe. They know nothing of God's movement in this age of Aquarius to turn this from a place of bombing and hell and fire into a place of love. But in Psalm 118, verse 22, it says, the stone which the builders refused has become the headstone of the corner. And they have refused it. And it's become the headstone. And it has become the source. And whenever you meditate and whenever you enter into your meditation, that little pineal gland opens up. The pineal stone, the headstone. And this stone, the pineal, becomes active in meditation. And in Genesis 28:22, Jacob says, and this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you shall give, I will give the tenth unto that place, which means I will sacrifice my thoughts and I will sacrifice that which is my side, and I will give unto you the stone. And so there we gone through the point where we were in this struggle. We were in this struggle with ourselves, Jacob and Esau. We were in this battle within raging in our own minds. We received the instruction from the Spirit to go to the place of the white mountain, which is the higher place of consciousness separated from the thoughts of the mind. And there in the wilderness of meditation, we found this stone, which is the pineal stone. And it showed us the movement upward, upward to the spine, downward to the spine, the flow of the tides, the flows of the heavens. And at the very top of that place, at the very top of that ladder was God. And it was the pineal stone. And the oil was placed upon the pineal stone because the energy from the solar plexus through the kundalini had driven it upward and bathed that pineal stone in the oil of life. And there we made a pillar. And there we made a pledge. And there we made a covenant inside of ourselves of an everlasting union and an understanding of God and of this age. Okay. Thank you. And we'll be back.